Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was the pirate king in the world of One Piece. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The sky over the island of Oakhaven was the color of a fresh bruise. Viscous, gray clouds churned in a perpetual twilight, heavy with rain that never quite fell, but instead hung in the air as a chilling, salty mist. The sea, a restless beast, smashed itself against the island's jagged cliffs, its roars a constant, miserable chorus. The very wood of the seaside town seemed waterlogged and weary, the buildings hunched over as if bracing for a blow that had been coming for years. This was the New World, where the weather was as much a tyrant as any emperor. But on Oakhaven, the weather was the least of their worries. Inside the town's largest and only tavern, the Drowned Man's Luck, the mood was even fouler than the air outside. The place smelled of stale ale, fear, and damp wool. Fishermen with hands as gnarled as ancient roots stared into empty mugs, their faces etched with a profound exhaustion that went deeper than physical labor. Women clutched shawls around their shoulders, their gazes fixed on the door as if expecting a monster to burst through at any moment. The monster they awaited wore the crisp white and gold of the world government. Vice Admiral Brannigan was a man built like a barrel, with a face that looked permanently sunburnt, and a sneer that seemed to be his only expression. His pristine marine coat, draped over his shoulders like a cape, was an insult to the grime and poverty of the town he lorded over. He sat at the cleanest table, a bottle of expensive North Blue wine before him, flanked by two hulking subordinates. "The tribute is late, Mayor," Brannigan said, his voice a gravelly rumble that cut through the tavern's anxious silence. He didn't look at the mayor, a portly, trembling man named Hemlock, but instead swirled the wine in his glass, admiring its color. "The sea has been uncooperative lately. My protectorate fee ensures a certain level of cooperation." Mayor Hemlock wrung his hands, his knuckles white. "Vice Admiral, sir, the storms. The nets come up empty. The men are risking their lives for scraps. We just don't have the berries you demand this week. Please, a few more days." Clang. Brannigan slammed his glass down, the red liquid sloshing over the rim. His eyes, small and piggy, finally fixed on the mayor. "Days? Do you think it cares about days? Do you think the Leviathan of the Oakhaven Trench understands economics?" He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, venomous whisper. "I am the only thing standing between your miserable little rock and that thing. The protection I offer is absolute. The price is also absolute. You will pay it." Now, fear, thick and suffocating, rolled through the room. Every person in the tavern knew of the Leviathan. They had heard its abyssal roars on moonless nights, seen the splintered remains of ships that had strayed too close to the trench. It was the island's boogeyman, a creature of nightmare-given flesh and fang, and Vice Admiral Brannigan, through some dark method he never explained, held its leash. He was their savior and their extortionist, a demon wearing the mask of justice. In a shadowed corner booth, a young man with a wild mane of forest green hair watched the scene unfold. He was dressed simply, in dark trousers and a worn, gray tunic that did little to hide the corded muscle of his physique. Scars crisscrossed his arms like a roadmap of pain, the most prominent being a latticework of old wounds that covered his right hand and forearm. His face was freckled and framed by unruly curls, but his eyes were ancient. They were a startling, vibrant emerald green, and within them swirled a storm of analysis, empathy, and a sorrow so profound it seemed to belong to a man 100 years his senior. This was Izuku Midoriya. The world, in its headlines and terrified whispers, called him Pirate King Deku. He sat hunched over a small, leather-bound notebook, a stick of charcoal dancing across the page with practiced speed. He wasn't drawing, but writing, his hand a blur of motion. Vice Admiral Brannigan appears to be a non-devil fruit user. Relies on standard marine swordsmanship and intimidation. Key leverage, control over a local sea king, designated Leviathan. Method of control unknown. Possible Viva card fragment? A specific sound frequency? A captured offspring? Must consider all possibilities. His arrogance is his greatest weakness. He believes his authority is absolute because it's backed by the world government and a monster. A quiet cough beside him broke his concentration. Still muttering to yourself in that book, Captain? I thought finding the One Piece would cure you of that. The voice was dry, intelligent, and carried a hint of weary amusement. Elara sat across from him, sliding a tankard of water onto the table. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe, practical bun, and her sharp, obsidian eyes missed nothing. A long, thin scar sliced diagonally across the bridge of her nose, a permanent reminder of the Buster Call that had erased her home kingdom from the map. She was the navigator, strategist, and historian of their crew, the woman who charted their course through both the treacherous seas and the even more treacherous tides of politics. Deku offered a sheepish smile, a flash of the earnest boy he once was. It helps me think, Elara. You know that. I know it makes you look like a man, she corrected, but her lips twitched upwards. Koa has finished his sweep of the southern cliffs. The Leviathan's nest is in the deep trench, just as the locals said. He couldn't get a clear look at it, but he felt its presence. It's large. As if on cue, a third figure entered the tavern. He was a colossal fishman, his skin the color of deep ocean blue, his webbed hands the size of dinner plates. He moved with a silence that belied his size, his presence a calming anchor in the storm of the tavern's fear. This was Koa, the helmsman of their ship, the saving grace. Deku had freed him from a slave auction in the Sabedi archipelago years ago, and in return, Koa had pledged his life and his unparalleled skill at the rudder. He spoke little, but his loyalty was as deep and unshakable as the sea itself. Koa approached their table and gave a short, sharp nod. It is larger than the ship. Strong. Sleeping for now. His gaze flickered towards Vice Admiral Brannigan, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. He stinks of cruelty. Deku placed a calming hand on the table. I know. But we have to time this right. We can't just smash our way through this. We have to save them, not just beat him. He looked from the frightened face of the mayor to the sneering visage of the marine. We have to show them there's a different way. His words were a mantra, the core principle of his reign as Pirate King. He hadn't sought the title. After a bizarre, inexplicable journey from his world to this one, he had simply done what he always did, try to help people. That path had led him through countless battles, forged impossible alliances, and culminated on the final island, Laugh Tale. There, he had not found mountains of gold or weapons of mass destruction. He found a story, the true history of a world shackled by lies, the tale of a promise made by a man named Joy Boy, and the inherited will of a dawn that had failed to break. The One Piece wasn't an ending. It was a mission brief. And so, Izuku Midoriya, the boy who inherited One for All, became the Pirate King who didn't plunder or conquer. He liberated. His grand fleet was not composed of bloodthirsty pirates, but of the people of islands he had freed, of kingdoms he had protected. He was a new kind of power in the world, and the world government, the architects of the planet's suffering, saw him not as a rival king, but as a conceptual threat. A disease of hope that had to be purged. Back in the center of the tavern, the situation was escalating. Enough of your sniveling! Brannigan roared, kicking Mayor Hemlock's chair out from under him. The old man yelped, crashing to the floor. I will have my tribute, or I will let the Leviathan have its meal. Perhaps watching your town get torn apart, board by board, will remind you of the value of my protection. A young fisherman, no older than 20, shot to his feet, his face pale but resolute. You're no protector. You're a parasite. We'd be better off fighting the monster ourselves than feeding a vulture like you. Brannigan's sneer widened into a predatory grin. Brave words. In a flash, he drew his sword, its polished steel gleaming in the dim light. Before anyone could react, he lunged, not at the boy, but at the boy's elderly father, who was sitting beside him. The old man cried out as the blade sliced across his arm, drawing a gout of crimson. Father! The boy screamed. The next one goes through his heart, Brannigan said calmly, pressing the flat of his blade against the old man's chest. Now. The tribute. Deku stood up. The movement was simple, fluid, yet it drew every eye in the room. The air itself seemed to still. The quiet analyst in the corner was gone. In his place stood a figure of immense presence, his kind eyes now blazing with a righteous, controlled fury. The very atmosphere in the tavern shifted, the oppressive fear momentarily replaced by a startling, electric tension. "That's enough," Deku said. His voice was not loud, but it resonated with an authority that dwarfed Brannigan's bluster. It was the voice of a man who had stared down emperors and gods and had not flinched. Brannigan turned, his eyes narrowing at the scarred young man. "And who are you to tell me what's enough, boy? Another hero with a death wish?" Deku took a step forward. The floorboards didn't creak. "Let the man go. Take your men, get on your ship, and leave this island. Never come back." For a moment, Brannigan was too stunned to speak. Then he threw his head back and laughed, a harsh, grating sound. You're giving me orders? The Pirate King's flunkies get braver every year. Do you have any idea who I am?" "I do," Deku said, his expression hardening. "You're a man who uses the shield of justice to hide his own greed. You prey on the weak and call it protection. You are a disgrace to the uniform you wear and the people you swore to serve." Before Brannigan could retort, something deep within Deku's mind flared to life. It was not a thought, but a physical sensation, a cold, sharp spike at the base of his skull, a chilling premonition of malice directed not at him, but at the innocent. It was his danger sense, a hyper-advanced form of observation hockey that had become an intrinsic part of his being, a gift from a previous wielder of his power. It screamed a single, silent warning: the town. Brannigan's eyes glinted with sadistic glee. He hadn't been waiting for the tribute. This was all a performance. "You're right," the Vice Admiral chuckled, his voice dropping low. "I am a disgrace, but I'm a rich disgrace. And you, boy, have just provided the perfect excuse." He raised a small, oddly shaped conch shell to his lips. "You see, my protection is on a timer. And the alarm is about to go off." He blew into the shell. No sound came out that human ears could register, but the effect was immediate and catastrophic. The entire island shuddered. The drowned man's luck trembled, mugs rattling on the shelves. Outside, a sound began to rise from the depths of the sea. It was not the familiar crash of waves, but a guttural, primeval roar, a sound of pure, unadulterated hunger that vibrated in the bones and chilled the soul. The Leviathan of the Oakhaven Trench was awake. Panic erupted. The townsfolk screamed, scrambling for the exits, their faces masks of pure terror. Brannigan laughed, a triumphant, ugly sound. "Run, you little rats! Run! Let's see who you pray to now." Deku didn't run. He moved. "Alara, get the civilians to the high ground, now!" he commanded, his voice sharp and clear over the din. "Koa, with me. We need to intercept it before it reaches the docks." Alara was already in motion, her sharp voice cutting through the panic. "Everyone, this way! To the old church on the hill. Move!" She drew a small flintlock, not to threaten, but as a symbol of authority, guiding the terrified islanders with a firm, practiced hand. Deku and Koa burst out of the tavern into the oppressive gray mist. The sight that greeted them was apocalyptic. A colossal head, larger than a galleon, was rising from the churning water near the port. Its skin was a sickly, mottled green-gray, covered in barnacles the size of shields. Its eyes were milky, soulless orbs of white, and its cavernous mouth was lined with rows of teeth like jagged daggers. A wave of displaced water, a mini tsunami, surged towards the town, threatening to smash the docks and the waterfront homes to splinters. "Koa!" Deku yelled. The fishman didn't need to be told. He planted his feet, took a deep breath, and slammed his palms together. Fishman karate, Gyojin jujutsu, Mizugakoro. With a mighty roar, Koa seemed to merge with the incoming wave. He didn't stop it, but rather guided it, manipulated it, his fishman heritage giving him mastery over the very water that threatened to destroy the town. The towering wall of destruction split in two, flowing harmlessly around the docks and crashing against the cliffs on either side, the spray rising hundreds of feet into the air. The Leviathan, its initial attack thwarted, let out another earth-shaking roar and lunged forward, its massive jaws agate, ready to bite the town in half. Deku met its charge head-on. He ran along the main pier, his feet barely seeming to touch the damp wood. Green lightning, the visual manifestation of his unique, stockpiled hockey, began to crackle around his body. This was one for all, the sacred torch passed down through generations, recontextualized in this world not as a quirk, but as the ultimate expression of the human will. It was the pinnacle of Haki, a power to command, to protect, to save. He leaped. He soared through the air, a green comet against the bruised sky, aiming not for the creature's eyes or its throat, but for the vast, flat expanse of its forehead. He wasn't preparing a punch. He wasn't preparing to kill. He was preparing to speak. As he flew, he drew upon the deepest, most potent aspect of his power. Not the raw, physical force, but the indomitable will that fueled it. This was his conqueror's Haki, infused with the spirits of 8 past wielders and his own unwavering belief in heroism. It wasn't the tyrannical presence of other kings, a force meant to crush and dominate. Deku's Haki was a broadcast of his soul. To his enemies, it was a wave of debilitating fear, a vision of an unstoppable force that stood for everything they opposed. But to the innocent, and to the wild, it was something else entirely. He landed on the creature's head with a soft thud that sent shudders through its massive frame. The Leviathan thrashed, trying to dislodge him, its roars filled with fury and confusion. Deku closed his eyes, placing a scarred palm flat against its rough, damp hide. He focused his will, pouring all of his conviction, all of his empathy, all of his desire to protect into a single, overwhelming pulse of power. Calm down! The command was not spoken aloud. It was a psychic shockwave, a tsunami of pure will that washed over the creature's primitive mind. The Leviathan froze mid-lunge. Its furious roars ceased, replaced by a low, confused whine. In its mind, the maddening, agitating call of Brannigan's conch shell was being drowned out by an entirely new sensation. It was a feeling of safety, of peace. It was the feeling of a calm sea after a great storm, of a warm current in the cold deep. The Haki didn't just command it, it reassured it. It was the will of a protector, not a master. The creature's massive body went slack, its head slowly sinking until its milky eyes were level with Deku. It blinked, a slow, ponderous motion. The rage was gone, replaced by a docile, almost curious calm. From the cliffs, the townsfolk watched in stunned silence, Elara standing among them. They had expected a battle of gods, a clash that would destroy their home. They did not expect a man to tame their nightmare with a single touch. Deku gave the creature's head a gentle pat. "It's okay," he murmured, his voice soft. "He can't make you do it anymore. Go back to the deep. Go home." He pushed off gently, but with enough force to propel him back towards the shore. Then, with a gesture, he used his own Haki to gently nudge the great beast, guiding it like a tugboat maneuvering a massive freighter. The Leviathan, now completely pacified, turned its bulk around and, with a final, quiet rumble, sank back beneath the waves, disappearing into the dark waters of the trench from whence it came. Silence descended upon Oakhaven. It was broken by a single, disbelieving sob from one of the townspeople, then another, and then a ragged, hesitant cheer that quickly grew into a roar of pure, unadulterated joy and relief. Deku landed softly on the dock, the green lightning around him dissipating. He took a deep breath, the strain of such a massive Haki release making his head spin. He looked back at the tavern, where Vice Admiral Brannigan stood frozen in the doorway, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. His trump card, his monster, his entire system of control, had just been taken from him by a scarred boy in a plain tunic. "How?" Brannigan stammered, his sword trembling in his hand. "How did you do that? What kind of monster are you?" Deku's gaze, now cold as the deep sea, settled on him. "I'm not a monster." He started walking towards the Vice Admiral, his footsteps echoing on the wood. Brannigan's 2 subordinates, finally shaking off their shock, drew their own cutlasses and charged, roaring. They didn't even get close. Tendrils of pure, black energy, shimmering with a faint green outline, erupted from Deku's back and arms. They were not solid matter, but Haki given form, the power of Black Whip, a manifestation of pure, hardened armament Haki that he could control like his own limbs. The tendrils shot out, impossibly fast, and wrapped around the charging Marines, disarming them and binding them in an unbreakable grip before they could even blink. They were lifted into the air, struggling uselessly against solidified will. "You call on a monster to terrorize innocent people," Deku said, his voice dangerously low as he continued his slow, deliberate walk towards the terrified Vice Admiral. "You beat and abuse them for your own profit. You hide behind your title and your flag. And you have the audacity to call me the monster? Brannigan, his bravado shattered, took a step back, then another. Stay back. I'm a vice admiral of the world government. To strike me is to declare war on the world. Too late for that, Deku said, a grim sadness in his tone. He was now standing directly in front of Brannigan. They declared war on me the day I decided that everyone was a group worth saving. He raised his right arm, the one covered in scars. The green lightning flared to life, more intense than before, crawling up his limb like incandescent ivy. He clenched his fist, and the air itself seemed to compress around it. This is for the people of Oakhaven, he said, his voice echoing with the power of one for all. And for every other island you've bled dry. He drew his arm back. Detroit. Brannigan screamed, a pathetic, high-pitched sound, and swung his sword wildly. Smash! Deku's punch didn't connect with Brannigan's body. He would not give the man the satisfaction of martyrdom, or the dignity of a warrior's defeat. Instead, his fist stopped a foot from the vice admiral's chest. The resulting shockwave, a focused cannon of pure kinetic force and conqueror's hockey, was devastating. The air warped. Brannigan's sword shattered into 1,000 pieces. The force lifted him off his feet and sent him flying backward, straight through the wall of the tavern he had occupied, landing in a heap amidst splintered wood and broken tables, unconscious but alive. Deku lowered his arm, the lightning receding. He gently deposited the two bound Marines on the ground, still wrapped in black whip. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, from the cliffside, the cheers erupted again, louder this time, filled with awe and gratitude. He turned to face the townspeople, who were now cautiously making their way down from the high ground, their eyes wide. He saw Mayor Hemlock being helped to his feet, staring at Deku as if he were a figure from legend. Deku gave them a small, tired, but genuine smile. It's over. He won't be bothering you anymore. He walked over to the young fisherman whose father Brannigan had cut. The old man was clutching his bleeding arm, wincing in pain. Before anyone could react, a new figure bustled through the crowd. She was an elderly woman with kind, wrinkled eyes and silver hair tied in a loose bun, wearing a doctor's coat over a simple dress. Oh, you reckless boy, she tut-tutted, looking not at the injured fisherman, but at Deku. Pushing yourself like that again. Let me see your hands. This was Dr. Bell, the crew's doctor and a wielder of the Chiyu no Mi, the heal fruit. She had been a royal physician until her kingdom was purged for asking too many questions about the Void Century. I'm fine, Dr. Bell, Deku insisted, though his knuckles were scraped raw. Humph. We'll see about that later, she said, before turning her full attention to the injured man. She placed her hands over his wound. A gentle, warm light emanated from her palms, and the deep gash knitted itself closed before their very eyes, leaving behind only smooth, unblemished skin. The fisherman and his son stared, speechless. Dr. Bell just sniffed. Now, no more excitement. This old heart can't take it. She looked at Deku, her stern expression softening. You did good, Izuku. You did real good. As the sun finally began to break through the oppressive clouds, casting the first real light Oakhaven had seen in days, the people surrounded Deku. They didn't shrink from him as they would a pirate like Kaido or Big Mom. They reached out, touching his arm, thanking him, crying tears of joy. He wasn't a conqueror to be feared. He was a liberator. A hero. He spent the next hour helping them. He used the raw strength of one for all to haul broken fishing boats from the water and set them back in their cradles for repair. He used Black Whip to clear the debris from Brannigan's explosive exit. He spoke with Mayor Hemlock, giving him the location of a nearby island where a detachment of Sword, the secret marine faction led by a man he trusted, was operating. Tell Captain Kobe what happened here, he said, handing the mayor an unadorned den mushi. He'll see that Brannigan faces actual justice. As the crew of the Saving Grace prepared to depart, a rhythmic flapping sound approached. A news crew, diligent as ever, swooped down and dropped a freshly printed paper at Alara's feet before accepting its payment and flying off. News from the outside world, Alara said, picking it up. She unfolded it, her eyes scanning the front page. Her face, usually a mask of calm composure, slowly tightened. Her knuckles went white where she gripped the paper. Alara? What is it? Deku asked, pausing in his work. She didn't answer immediately. She just stared at the massive, bold headline, her breath catching in her throat. Finally, she looked up, her dark eyes meeting Deku's. The joy of the morning's victory evaporated, replaced by the chilling cold of a coming war. She read the headline aloud, her voice steady and clear, a death knell in the hopeful air. World government declares Pirate King Deku the greatest threat to global security. Ayamu-sama's will be done. Below the headline was a grim, imposing picture of Fleet Admiral Sakazuki, his face a mask of volcanic fury. A direct quote was printed beneath it, attributed to the man himself. The age of heroic piracy is a cancer on the world. This pirate king and his ideology of false hope are a direct assault on absolute justice. We will not rest. We will not falter. We will hunt him, his followers, and any who give them shelter, and we will burn their dream from this world with the fires of eradication. There will be no mercy. The cheering of the Oakhaven people faded into a dull roar in Deku's ears. The warmth of the sun felt suddenly cold. He looked at the grateful faces around him, at the town he had just saved. He looked at his crew, Koa, Ilara, Dr. Bell, his family. They weren't just hunting him. They were hunting everyone he had ever sworn to protect. They were going to punish the world for daring to believe in him. A deep, weary sigh escaped his lips. But when he looked up again, the exhaustion in his emerald eyes was gone, replaced by a familiar, unbreakable fire. It was the fire of a boy who ran towards a monster without a quirk. It was the fire of a hero who inherited the will of giants. It was the fire of a king who would bear the weight of the world to save it. He met Ilara's worried gaze, a grim, determined smile touching his lips. Well, the Pirate King said, his voice quiet but ringing with unshakable resolve. It looks like they're finally ready to fight. The air in Wano Kuni tasted of cherry blossoms and freedom. As the Saving Grace navigated the newly opened channel leading to the flower capital, a profound sense of peace washed over Deku. He stood at the ship's prow, the wind, clean and fresh, teasing his unruly green curls. Gone was the toxic smog that had once choked these skies, a byproduct of Kaido's weapons factories. The rivers, once poisoned and foul, now ran with water so clear you could count the stones on the riverbed. This was Wano reborn. The nation of samurai, for so long a cage of its own making, was now a beacon. Brightly colored cart banners fluttered from the curved rooftops of the capital. The sounds of shamisen music and joyous laughter drifted across the water, a symphony of a people unshackled. On the riverbanks, children ran freely, their faces bright with smiles that had been a rarity just a few years ago. Samurai in traditional armor trained in open dojos, their blades flashing in the sunlight, no longer hiding their strength but honing it for the protection of their home. This, Deku thought with a pang in his chest that was equal parts pride and terror, was what they were fighting for. This was the proof of concept. It was one thing to dream of a world free from tyranny. It was another to see it, to breathe its air, to witness its beauty firsthand. It made the threat bearing down on them feel all the more monstrous. The news from the paper felt like a physical weight, a promise of fire and ash aimed directly at this paradise. The Saving Grace docked at a pier reserved for the shogun's personal guests. A delegation was already waiting, led by a figure who had grown into his title with a grace that still astonished Deku. Kazuki Momonosuke stood tall, clad in ornate shogun's robes, his once childish face now set with the quiet dignity of a ruler. Yet, when he saw Deku disembark, a genuine, warm smile broke through his formal composure. Midori Yadano, Momonosuke said, bowing deeply. Welcome back to Wano. Our home is your home. Deku returned the bow, a smile touching his own lips. Momonosuke-kun. You look well. The burdens of leadership suit you. They are heavy, Momonosuke admitted, straightening up, but they are a privilege. A privilege you and your allies helped us reclaim. His gaze swept over the thriving city behind him. Everything you see here is a testament to the hope you gave us. We will not see it threatened. His voice had taken on a hard, steely edge that reminded Deku of his father, Odin. The boy who had been afraid of his own shadow was gone, replaced by a man ready to defend his nation to the last. The others are waiting in the castle, Momonosuke said, gesturing for them to follow. The situation is as grave as your message implied. The war council was held in the main hall of the shogun's castle, a vast room with painted screens depicting dragons and tigers. The air was thick with tension, a gathering of immense power and revolutionary fervor. These were not kings and generals meeting to divide spoils. They were architects of a new world, meeting to prevent the destruction of their foundation. In one corner, leaning against a lacquered pillar with an air of casual intensity, was Sabo. As the chief of staff of the Revolutionary Army, he was the world's second most wanted man, a phantom of flame and rebellion. His formal black coat was pristine, his blonde hair shadowing a face scarred by his past but illuminated by a fiery conviction. He and Deku had met during the chaos following the reverie, finding in each other an immediate and absolute ideological alignment. The revolutionaries fought to tear down the corrupt system from within. Deku, the pirate king, fought to protect the people the system crushed. They were two sides of the same liberating coin. Sabo met Deku's gaze and gave a sharp, confident nod. Deku. Good to see you in one piece for now. His tone was light, but his eyes held the gravity of the situation. Dragon sends his regards. He says the storm we have long predicted is finally making landfall. Tell him we'll be ready for it, Deku replied, his voice firm. His eyes then moved to another figure, one who seemed to suck the warmth from his immediate vicinity. Trafalgar D. Waterlaw stood with his arms crossed, his cursed blade Kikoku resting against his shoulder. His signature spotted hat was pulled low, but his sharp, calculating eyes missed nothing. Law was not a man driven by idealism like Deku or Sabo. He was a pragmatist, a surgeon who saw the world as a broken body in need of precise, often brutal, operations. He had allied with Deku after seeing that the Pirate King's goals, dismantling the power of the world nobles and exposing the lies of the Void Century, were the most efficient path to his own. He respected Deku's power but was often exasperated by his boundless compassion. Pirate Kingia, Law grunted, his voice a low drawl. You have a talent for kicking the biggest hornet's nest in the world. It needed kicking, Law, Deku said simply. Law just smirked, a humorless twitch of his lips. We'll see if we survive the sting. In the center of the room, on a low, ornate table, sat a peculiar device, a specially modified Den Mushi. It was larger than a standard one, its shell inlaid with sea prism stone fragments to block unauthorized listeners. Two smaller snails were connected to it, their eyes open and alert, projecting the disembodied voices of two of the Alliance's most crucial members. Midoriya-san, it is a relief to hear your voice, came a voice, clear and regal, filled with a quiet strength that had been forged in conspiracy and near tragedy. It was Princess Nefertari Vivi of Alabasta. She was their voice within the legitimate governments of the world, a spy in the House of Kings, gathering support from other nations disillusioned with the world government's tyranny. We are with you, Deku-san, whispered a second voice, this one softer, laced with a timidity that could not entirely hide a newfound, deep resolve. It was Princess Shirahoshi of the Ryugu Kingdom on Fishman Island. Deku had saved her island from destruction and her family from assassins, and in doing so, had earned the unwavering loyalty of the Fishmen. More than that, he had shown Shirahoshi that her power, the ability to command sea kings, the power of the ancient weapon Poseidon, was not a curse, but a tool that could be used for protection. Vivi-san, Shirahoshi-san, Deku said, his voice softening as he addressed the Den Mushi. Thank you for joining us. I'm sorry to bring this danger to your homes. Do not apologize for fighting for what is right, Vivi's voice returned, sharp and immediate. Alabasta has faced the machinations of the world government before. We will not bow to them now. Shirahoshi's voice followed, gaining a bit of strength. My father and brothers say the same. The people of Fishman Island know what true freedom looks like now, thanks to you. We will guard it with our lives. Deku's own crew stood by his side. Elara held a thick portfolio of maps and documents, her face grim and professional. Koa stood like a blue-skinned mountain behind her, his arms crossed, his gaze sweeping the room, a silent guardian. Dr. Bell had opted to wait on the ship, preparing medical supplies. There will be enough broken bodies to fix soon enough, she had said, her pragmatism a chilling forecast. Momonosuke took his seat at the head of the table. Let us begin, he said, his voice commanding silence. Elaradano, Laudano. The floor is yours. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the strategist and the surgeon. Law was the first to speak. He pushed himself off the pillar and walked to a large map of the world spread across the table. He used the tip of Kakoka's scabbard as a pointer. The intelligence gathered from our sources within the Marines and Saboya's network is conclusive, Law began, his voice flat and clinical. Fleet Admiral Sakazuki has mobilized over 200 battleships. That's 3/4 of the world government's entire naval power. It's the largest fleet mobilization since the days of the God Valley incident. He tapped the map at a point west of Ueno. The first Grand Fleet is assembling here, under the command of Admiral Kizaru. Their objective is almost certainly Ueno. He then tapped a location in the Grand Line, near the Red Line's base. The second Grand Fleet is here, led by Admiral Fujitora. Given his reluctance for needless conflict, his fleet is likely intended as a pincer or a reserve force. Finally, he tapped a spot deep in the New World, and the third, led by Akainu himself, is making a direct course for our current position. Their vanguard is likely less than 3 days out. Sabo spoke up, his arms crossed. My people confirm this. They're stripping garrisons bare across the 4 blues. They're leaving themselves vulnerable everywhere. This isn't just a punitive expedition, it's an all-or-nothing gamble. They intend to end this in a single, decisive stroke. And a fleet of that size is a battle we can win, Momonosuke said, his hand resting on the hilt of his katana. The samurai of Ueno do not fear numbers. Law shook his head, a grim look on his face. Normally, I'd agree. Our combined forces, the Straw Hat Grand Fleet remnants loyal to Dekuya, the revolutionary fleets, the Heart Pirates, and the full might of Ueno, could meet them head-on. It would be bloody, but manageable. He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle. But that's not the real threat. That's just a distraction. He looked at Alara, who stepped forward, her expression dark. She opened her portfolio, laying several documents on the map. One was a rubbing from a poneglyph fragment she had discovered on a forgotten sky island. Another was a decoded cipher from a revolutionary mole deep within the scientific branch on Egghead. The world government isn't just sending a fleet, Alara said, her voice low and steady, though Deku could see the slight tremor in her hands. They're preparing to deploy a weapon, something the 5 elders have kept hidden even from the fleet admiral, until now. Her finger traced over the ancient text on the poneglyph rubbing. The old stories, the ones from the Void Century, speak of 3 great powers. Poseidon, she nodded towards the Den Mushi, acknowledging Shirahoshi, the power to command the kings of the sea. Pluton, she gestured towards the map of Ueno, the great warship still sleeping somewhere beneath our feet. And a third. Uranus. A chill went through the room. The name was a whisper from the dawn of time, a legend of apocalyptic power. We always assumed it was lost, like Pluton was believed to be, Lara continued. But the intel from our source on Egghead suggests otherwise. Vegapunk, in his endless research, rediscovered the principles behind it. Or perhaps, he was ordered to build a modern equivalent. They call it the Mother Flame, but the energy signature it produces, it matches the descriptions of Uranus from the poneglyph texts perfectly. A power that strikes from the heavens. Vivi's voice was a horrified whisper. Like a buster call, but global? Worse, Law cut in, his face devoid of its usual arrogant smirk, replaced by genuine concern. A buster call is a brute force instrument. 10 battleships leveling an island. It's messy. This is different. The energy readings are off the scale. It's not a cannon. It's not a bomb. It's a scalpel. A scalpel that can erase an entire island from the map in an instant, from anywhere in the world, leaving nothing behind but ocean. Deku felt his danger sense prickle at the back of his neck, not from an immediate threat, but from the sheer, world-ending malice of the concept. A power to murder an entire culture from a safe distance. It was the ultimate coward's weapon, and they have a target list, Alara said, her voice dropping almost to a whisper. She slid 3 more pieces of paper onto the map. Each held a single, horrifying word. The 5 elders have authorized a simultaneous, coordinated strike, she announced, her voice trembling with rage. As the fleets engage us to pin us down, they will activate the weapon. Their targets are not our armies. They're our homes. The symbols of our new era. She tapped the first paper, which she placed over the map of Wano. Target 1, the flower capital of Wano Kuni. Momonosuke's breath hitched, his face turning pale. His hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles turned white. Elara's finger moved to the second paper, placing it over the red dot marking the Ryugu Kingdom. Target 2, Fishman Island. A soft, terrified gasp came from the Den Mushi. No! Shirahoshi whimpered. Elara's hand hesitated for a moment before she placed the final paper down, this one over a sprawling desert kingdom in the first half of the Grand Line. And Target 3, the royal capital of Alyabarna, in Alabasta. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by Vivi's sharp, choked-off cry over the Den Mushi. The sheer, calculated cruelty of the plan was suffocating. It was a strategy of pure terror. The world government wasn't just trying to kill the pirate king. They were trying to murder his legacy. They were going to burn down the paradises he had helped build, slaughtering millions of innocent civilians to prove a single, monstrous point: hope is weakness. Defiance is death. Sabo was the first to break the silence, a low growl of pure fury rumbling in his chest. Flames began to lick at his shoulders, a manifestation of his rage. Those bastards. Those celestial monsters. They would kill millions, just to make a point? Momonosuke whispered, his eyes wide with horror and disbelief. My people. It's a slave owner's tactic, Law said, his voice cold as ice. If one slave rebels, you don't just punish him. You make an example of his family to ensure no one else ever dares to dream of freedom. He looked directly at Deku. This is because of you, Pirate King Ia. They see the hope you've inspired as a disease, and this is how they plan to cauterize the wound. Deku hadn't spoken. He stood staring at the map, at the 3 death sentences laid out upon it. His mind was a whirlwind. He saw the smiling faces of the children in the streets of Wano. He saw the beautiful, fragile coral of Fishman Island. He remembered Vivi's descriptions of her beloved desert home, a land of warmth and ancient history. His fists were clenched at his sides. The green hockey lightning that always crackled around him when his emotions ran high was absent. In its place was a stillness, a terrifying calm that seemed to draw all the energy in the room towards him. He was processing, analyzing, his mind working at a furious pace, cataloging the threat, the stakes, the sheer, unforgivable evil of it all. He absently reached for the notebook tucked in his belt, his fingers twitching, but he stopped himself. Some things couldn't be broken down into notes and theories. This was a purely moral equation, and the answer was gut-wrenching. What is our play? Sabo demanded, his flames dying down, replaced by a cold, strategic fire. We can't be in 3 places at once. If we move the fleet to defend Alabasta or Fishman Island, Wano is left open to Kizaru. If we stay here, the other 2 are doomed. They've created an impossible choice. We could split our forces, Momonosuke suggested, his voice shaking but firm. The samurai will defend Wano. Your fleets could aid the others. They'll be picked off one by one, Law countered immediately. Their strategy is designed to counter that exact response. No. A direct confrontation is what they want. It's a trap. Our only option is to disappear. Use my powers, the revolutionary networks. We scatter. We go to ground, live to fight another day, and let them waste their resources hunting for us. And abandon our people? Vivi's voice shot back, laced with cold fury. Never. I will stand with my citizens in Alyabarna, and if the heavens rain fire upon us, we will face it together. She is right, Sabo said, turning on Law. We cannot run. The moment we abandon those who have placed their faith in us is the moment our revolution is well and truly dead. We would be no better than the pirates who raid and flee. The room devolved into a heated debate. Law argued for pragmatic survival, Sabo for a defiant stand, Momonosuke for the defense of his homeland. The air crackled with their conflicting wills, with the desperation of leaders facing an impossible choice. And still, Deku was silent. He closed his eyes. He wasn't just listening to their words. He was feeling their emotions. Momonosuke's fierce, protective love for his people. Vivi's righteous indignation. Shirahoshi's terrified but resolute heart. Sabo's all-consuming fire for justice. Law's cold, desperate calculus aimed at preserving their ability to fight. He felt it all. And he felt the weight of the millions of lives resting on the decision made in this room. He finally understood what All Might had meant, all those years ago in his own world. You can't save everyone. The thought was a dagger in his soul. But a second, more powerful thought rose to meet it, a defiant roar from the very core of his being. Then I'll just have to try anyway. He opened his eyes. The debate stopped instantly. Every head turned towards him. The Pirate King was about to speak. He walked to the table and looked down at the map, at the 3 condemned locations. He gently pushed the papers aside, revealing the world beneath. Law, you are right, he began, his voice quiet but resonant, filling the large hall. This is a trap. They want us to react exactly as we are, to choose between our allies, to fracture our resolve. They want us to fight their battle on their terms. He looked at Sabo. And you are right. We cannot run. We cannot abandon the very people we swore to protect. The dawn we promised cannot be built on a foundation of cowardice. He looked towards Momonosuke, and then at the Den Mushi. And you are all right to want to defend your homes. It is the most natural, most noble instinct a leader can have. He took a deep breath, his gaze sweeping over all of them, the living and the disembodied voices. They want to make an example of our world, he said, his voice gaining strength, infused with a haki that was not threatening, but unifying. They want to erase the hope we've built, piece by piece, to show everyone that standing against them is futile. He straightened up, his shoulders squared, no longer a thoughtful analyst but the king they had all chosen to follow. The air around him began to shimmer, not with green lightning, but with a palpable aura of sheer, indomitable will. They want to punish people for daring to dream of freedom. For believing that their lives matter more than the archaic power of a hidden tyrant on an empty throne. His emerald eyes blazed with a light that seemed to push back the shadows in the room. He slammed his scarred hand down flat on the center of the map, covering the red line, the very heart of the world government's power. I won't let that happen. The words were a vow, an oath sworn in the presence of his most trusted allies, echoing in the heart of the first nation he had helped liberate. They think this is a choice between 3 losing options. They are wrong. There is a 4th option. We will not defend. We will attack. We will not protect the symbols of our new world. We will destroy the symbol of the old one. His gaze was incandescent. His voice dropped to a low, powerful growl that was both a promise and a threat. We won't just weather this storm. He clenched his fist on the map, the paper crinkling under the pressure. We're going to end it. For everyone. Night had fallen over Wano Kuni, draping the flower capital in a blanket of serene darkness. Paper lanterns cast a warm, gentle glow along the streets, their light reflecting off the still waters of the canals. The sounds of the city had quieted to a soft murmur, the occasional strain of shamisen music a lonely, beautiful thread in the tapestry of the night. From the high balconies of the shogun's castle, the land looked peaceful, almost deceptively so. It was a world holding its breath. But on the main deck of the Saving Grace, docked silently at the pier, there was no peace. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and the sharp, crackling sound of immense power being barely contained. Izuku Midoriya moved through a series of katas, his form a blur of motion under the pale moonlight. This was not the precise, practiced training of a swordsman, or the fluid grace of a martial artist. It was raw, explosive, and utterly overwhelming. Green lightning, the signature visual of his haki, no longer just crackled around him but clung to him like a second skin, a roaring aura of emerald energy. With every punch, the air itself seemed to shudder and cry out. A simple jab created a sonic boom that sent ripples across the water and the harbor. An upward kick sent a blade of compressed air screaming into the night sky, harmlessly dissipating miles above. He was pushing himself, not for strength. He already had more than enough of that, but for control. The sheer, world-breaking power of One for All was a constant storm within him, and every day was a battle to remain its master and not become its vessel. Tonight, the storm was raging. The weight of his own declaration in the War Council pressed down on him with the force of a tectonic plate. We will attack. We will end it. It was a bold, decisive strategy, the only one that broke the world government's terrible logic. But it was also a plan that put the entire world on his shoulders. He had looked into the eyes of his allies, Sabo, Law, Momonosuke, Vivi, Shirahoshi, and seen them place their trust, their hopes, and the lives of millions into his scarred hands. He had accepted it without hesitation. Now, in the silence of the night, the sheer, crushing gravity of that responsibility threatened to pulverize him. He moved faster, harder, his grunts of effort lost in the scream of the wind. Tendrils of black whip, the hardened armament hockey he wielded like extra limbs, lashed out from his back, smashing into a reinforced training dummy with enough force to shatter stone. He was trying to exorcise the doubt, the fear, the ghost of a question that haunted him. What if I'm not enough? You're going to tear the ship apart, Captain. The voice, calm and steady, cut through his concentration. Koa stood at the top of the gangplank, a silhouette against the lantern light of the dock. The giant fish man held 2 cups of steaming tea, his presence an anchor in the whirlwind of Deku's power. Deku froze mid-strike, his fist vibrating an inch from the dummy's head. The green lightning sputtered and died, leaving an echoing silence in its wake. He slowly lowered his arm, his chest heaving, sweat plastering his green hair to his forehead. Sorry, Koa, he rasped, his voice hoarse. I didn't realize. I was just thinking. Your thinking is loud tonight, Koa observed, his expression unreadable as ever. He walked onto the deck, the wood groaning slightly under his weight, and handed Deku one of the cups. Dr. Bell made this, she said. If that boy is going to break himself, he can at least do it with a proper herbal blend in his system. Deku took the cup, his hands trembling slightly, not from exhaustion but from the adrenaline come down. The warmth of the ceramic was a small, grounding comfort. He took a sip. It tasted of chamomile and something else, something calming that seemed to soothe the frantic energy thrumming under his skin. He walked to the ship's railing and stared out at the dark, sleeping city. Koa stood beside him, a silent, comforting presence. For a long time, neither of them spoke. They're all counting on me, Koa, Deku said finally, his voice barely a whisper. Everyone. If I fail, if my plan is wrong. Wano, Alabasta, Fishman Island, they'll be gone. It's not just a battle anymore. It's everything. Koa took a slow sip of his tea. When you found me in sobriety, he said, his voice a low, deep rumble like stones shifting at the bottom of the sea, I was in a cage. The water in my tank was filthy, the air was thin. My world was meadow bars and the jeering faces of celestial dragons. He turned his head, his large, dark eyes fixing on Deku. My world was 4 feet wide. You smashed the cage. You gave me the entire ocean. He looked out at the vast, starry sky, at the horizon that promised an endless sea. You did not give me a new cage, even a bigger one. You gave me freedom. That is what you offer everyone. That is why they follow you. That is why I follow you. He turned back to Deku, his gaze unwavering. We do not follow you because we think you are infallible. We follow you because we know you will never, ever stop trying to do what is right. Even if it costs you everything. He placed a massive, webbed hand on Deku's shoulder, his grip gentle but firm as bedrock. You are not carrying this weight alone, Captain. You are just the one who points the way. We will help you carry it. Deku felt a lump form in his throat. He looked at the stoic fishman, his friend, and saw the absolute, unshakable faith in his eyes. It was a faith he felt he hadn't yet earned. He gave a shaky nod, unable to find the words to express his gratitude. Koa seemed to understand. He finished his tea and took Deku's empty cup. Rest, Captain. The storm inside you must be calm before you can face the one on the horizon. With that, the helmsman turned and disappeared back into the ship's interior, leaving Deku alone once more with the quiet night and his churning thoughts. Koa's words had helped, but the core of the problem remained. This wasn't just about his allies. It was about the power he wielded. One for all. In his old world, it was the ultimate power for good, a torch of heroism passed from one generation to the next. Here, in this world of pirates and emperors, it felt different. More primal. It was hockey, yes, but it was also something more. It was a confluence of wills, a legacy of souls bound together by a single, sacred mission. And sometimes, in moments of extreme stress or quiet introspection, he could feel them. He could hear their whispers, the ghosts of one for all. He walked to the center of the deck, sat down cross-legged, and closed his eyes. He regulated his breathing, sinking into a deep meditative state he had learned from an old monk in Ueno. He pushed past the surface thoughts, the strategic anxieties, the fear of failure. He reached deeper, into the core of his own being where his haki resided, where the emerald lightning was born. He reached for the nexus of his power, for the quiet, humming core of One for All. The world dissolved. He was no longer on the deck of the Saving Grace. He was adrift in a vast, dark space, illuminated by crackling veins of green energy that crisscrossed the void like a fractured sky. This was the vestige world, the inner sanctum of his power, a psychic landscape shaped by the wills of its previous users. And he was not alone. 7 figures emerged from the swirling darkness, their forms composed of the same shimmering green energy as the world around them. They were the past wielders of One for All, their consciousnesses imprinted upon the power itself, eternal guardians and advisors. A bald man with intense eyes and goggles perched on his head gave him a sharp nod. That was Hikid Shinomori, the 4th user, whose danger sense was a constant companion. A young man with black hair tied in a ponytail, the 6th user, offered a silent, encouraging smile. But Deku's attention was drawn to 2 figures in particular who stepped forward from the rest. The first was a woman with dark hair that floated around her as if underwater, a small mole under her lip. Her expression was a mixture of fierce pride and gentle concern. Nana Shimura, the 7th user, the teacher of his own world's all might. Her spirit was a bastion of strength and compassion within him. "You're troubled, Izuku," Nana said, her voice echoing in the void, filled with a warmth that felt as real as Koa's hand on his shoulder. "Your will is wavering." "I'm not wavering," Deku replied, his own voice sounding distant in this place. "I'm afraid. The world government, this weapon, they're going to burn the world down just to get to me. To what I represent. How can I fight that? How can I be a hero when the very act of my existence puts millions of innocent lives at risk?" Nana's expression softened. "Every hero in history has faced that question, child. To be a symbol is to be a target. The brighter you shine, the darker the shadow you cast. But you must never, ever let the fear of that shadow keep you from shining." She smiled, a brilliant, radiant expression that seemed to light up the dark void. "Remember what a hero's most important job is. It's to smile. To show the people that even in the face of overwhelming fear there is hope. That everything will be okay." Her words were a comfort, the familiar creed he had lived by his entire life. But this situation felt different. The stakes were higher than they had ever been. A reassuring smile felt insufficient. It was then that the 2nd figure stepped forward, and the entire vestige world seemed to hold its breath. He was a giant of a man, even as a spirit of light. His form was skeletal, gaunt, a shadow of his former glory, yet he radiated an aura of power that dwarfed all the others combined. 2 long, sharp bangs of hair-like energy framed a face with sunken cheeks and shadowed eyes, but within those shadows burned an inextinguishable fire. It was Tashinori Yagi. All Might. The specter of his mentor, his hero, the man who had given him everything, drifted closer. Deku felt a familiar lump in his throat, a childish urge to run to him, to confess all his fears as he had so many times before. "Young Midoriya," All Might's voice boomed, though it was tinged with a spectral echo, a deep melancholy. He looked at Deku, his glowing eyes filled with an immense, almost painful pride. "I have watched your journey in this new world. You have surpassed every expectation. You have done things I could only have dreamed of. You became a king." "I don't want to be a king," Deku said, shaking his head. "I just want to save people." "I know," All Might said, a ghostly smile touching his lips. "That is why you are the greatest of us all. But you are at a precipice. The enemy you face now is not a simple villain. It is not an evil organization. It is a system. A global ideology of control, perfected over 800 years. You cannot punch a system into submission." "Then what do I do?" Deku pleaded, his voice cracking. "How do I win?" All Might's smile faded, replaced by an expression of grim, terrible seriousness. "In our world I was the symbol of peace. My role was to stand as a pillar, to deter crime through my very presence, to maintain the status quo of a society that was, for the most part, just. But this world is not just. Its status quo is tyranny. Its peace is a lie built on the subjugation of the masses. The spectral giant reached out, placing a glowing hand on Deku's spiritual shoulder. The energy that flowed into him was not just power, but understanding. A torrent of history, of feeling, of grim necessity. To win this war, you cannot be a symbol of peace, All Might declared, his voice resonating with the finality of a death sentence. Peace is what your enemies claim to be upholding. You must become something more. Something more terrifying to them. His burning eyes stared into Deku's soul. You must become a symbol of revolution. The word struck Deku like a physical blow. Revolution. It was Sabo's word. It was a word of fire, of chaos, of tearing things down. It was a word that felt alien to his nature, which was to build, to protect, to save. A symbol of revolution is not a deterrent, All Might continued, his voice heavy with the weight of the truth he was imparting. It is an active agent of change. It does not wait for villains to appear. It seeks out the root of the system that creates them and rips it out, no matter the cost. It is a bloodier, messier, and far more terrifying role. It means understanding that to save the world, you may have to break it first. He gestured to the other vestiges, who watched in somber silence. Nana spoke of the importance of a smile. She is right. But a revolutionary's smile is different from a peacekeeper's. It is not just reassurance. It is defiance. It is the smile you wear as you stand on the gallows, the smile that tells the tyrants, you have not broken me. My will is free, and it will outlive you. It is a smile that inspires others not just to feel safe, but to fight. A new understanding began to dawn in Deku's mind, a terrible and necessary revelation. He had been trying to fight a war of liberation using the tactics of a peacekeeper. He had been trying to save a world that did not want to be saved, but to be freed. The two were not the same. Saving was about protecting what is. Freeing was about creating what could be. This power you wield, All Might said, his own form flickering as he gestured to the green energy swirling around them. One for all. We called it that because it was the power of one person, for the sake of all people. But its origins, the reason my master's brother created it, was to fight a singular, overwhelming evil. To fight his own brother, all for one, a tyrant who sought to rule the world. Then came the final, most important piece of the puzzle, the lore drop that connected Deku's past to this world's future. But the will behind it is much older than that. It is the same force that drives the strange destiny of those who bear the initial D. In this world, it is the inherited will that the old pirate king spoke of. The will of a man from the void century, a man they called Joy Boy. Deku's eyes widened. He had heard the name on Laugh Tale. He had read it on the Rio Poneglyph. Joy Boy failed, All Might said, his voice laced with an ancient sorrow. He made a promise he could not keep. His dream of a world where all races could live together under the same sun, a world of laughter and freedom, was crushed by the 20 kingdoms that would later become the world government. But his will did not die. It was inherited. It echoed through centuries, waiting for someone with the power and the heart to finally see it through. He looked at Deku, and for the first time, Deku saw not his mentor, but the culmination of a legacy that spanned millennia. One for all is the power to fulfill Joy Boy's promise. And you, Izuku Midoriya, are the confluence. The boy with the heart of a true hero, from a world without such evils, blessed with the power to fight them, and dropped into the world that needed you most. You are not just the ninth wielder of One for All. You are the second coming of Joy Boy. You are the living embodiment of this world's deepest, most desperate desire for freedom. The truth of it settled over Deku, not as a weight, but as a clarification. It was as if a lens had been focused, and his entire life, his entire journey, suddenly snapped into perfect, terrifying clarity. He was not a lost boy in a strange world. He was a tool of destiny, a failsafe for a failed dream. His purpose was not just to be a hero. It was to finish a war that had started 800 years ago. He looked at All Might, at Nana, at all the vestiges who had carried this burden, this hope, and passed it down to him. He saw the resolution in their spectral faces. They were not just ghosts in the machine. They were his first and most loyal allies, an army in his soul. He closed his eyes, and a single tear of emerald energy trickled down his cheek. It was a tear not of sadness, but of acceptance. Of understanding. When he opened his eyes, the vestige world was gone. He was back on the deck of the Saving Grace, the cool night air of Ueno on his skin. The moon was high in the sky. He felt calm. The frantic energy, the crushing weight, the fearful doubt, it had all been burned away, replaced by a cold, clear, absolute certainty. He stood up, his joints not cracking, his body feeling light and humming with a new kind of power. It wasn't stronger, but it was more focused. More refined. He knew what he had to do. He knew who he had to be. He held up his right hand and clenched it into a fist. The familiar green lightning crackled to life, but it was different now. It was sharper, more controlled. It didn't rage. It obeyed. He was no longer just wielding one for all. He was in perfect sync with its purpose, with the collective will of all 8 souls who lived within him. He looked out over the sleeping city of Ueno, no longer seeing it as something fragile to be shielded, but as the first brick in the new world he was now destined to build. His fear was gone. In its place was a resolve as hard and as bright as a diamond. He knew the path ahead would be filled with pain, with sacrifice, with blood. He knew that to be a symbol of revolution, he would have to make choices that the boy he once was would have found monstrous. He would have to be ruthless. He would have to be terrifying. But as he stared at the horizon, towards the enemy that was gathering to destroy everything he loved, a small, genuine smile touched his lips. It was not the wide, reassuring smile of the symbol of peace. It was the quiet, defiant smile of a man who had accepted his terrible, glorious destiny. The smile of a revolution about to begin. The air in Pangaea Castle was ancient and cold. It was a sterile cold, devoid of the natural chill of winter or the depths of the sea. It was the cold of absolute, timeless power, a stillness that had settled in the marbled halls of Mary Geos for 800 years. Here, atop the red line, the world was a distant, messy affair, a terrarium to be observed and managed, but never truly touched. The sun that shone through the colossal, arched windows seemed filtered, its warmth stripped away, leaving only a pale, judgmental light that fell upon floors polished to a mirror sheen. In the chamber of the 5 elders, this cold was concentrated to a near solid state. The room was opulent but severe, dominated by a large, circular table and 5 high-backed chairs. The walls were lined with books containing histories the world was forbidden to know, and maps showing kingdoms that no longer existed. It was the true nerve center of the planet, where the fates of billions were decided by the quiet consensus of 5 men who had long since ceased to be merely human. They were all present, their ancient faces etched with a gravity that went beyond the current crisis. It was the weariness of beings who measured time in centuries and saw history not as a story, but as a recurring, predictable, and irritating pattern. Saint J. Garcia Saturn, with his distinctive bald head, flowing white beard, and staff, tapped a long, gnarled finger on the table. The fleets are in position. Sakazuki is baying for blood like the rabid dog we shaped him to be. Everything is proceeding. His voice was a dry, rustling sound, like ancient parchment. Saint Shepherd Jupiter, the tall, blond, and youngest looking of the 5, leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed. And yet, the target remains elusive. Our intelligence confirms Midoriya is in Ueno, but he has gathered his allies. The revolutionary Sabo. The surgeon, Trafalgar Law. The samurai of the Kazuki clan. It is a formidable coalition. A coalition of dreamers, scoffed Saint Topman Warkiri, a man with a long, stern face and a formidable mustache. Insolent children playing at rebellion. They have never faced the true, consolidated power of the world government. This will be their first and final lesson. Saint Ethan Baron V. Nusjuro, the swordsman of the group, his hand resting on the hilt of his katana, remained silent, his eyes closed as if in meditation. His calm was perhaps the most unsettling of all, the stillness of a blade that knows it will soon be drawn. It was Saint Marcus Mars, the tall, wispy-bearded elder, who gave voice to their true concern. It is not his coalition that is the primary threat. It is the idea of him. This concept of a hero king, it is a semantic virus, an ideological poison. Gold Roger was a rogue, a force of chaos who inspired selfish dreams of wealth. This boy, This Deku, he inspires selfless dreams of liberation. That is infinitely more dangerous. The chamber door swung open silently, admitting a figure who seemed to bring the heat of the world below with him. Fleet Admiral Sakazuki, known to the world as Akainu, strode into the room. His white marine admiral's coat was pristine, but it could not hide the volcanic fury that burned constantly within him. His presence was an affront to the room's sterile cold, a raw, brutal force of nature intruding upon a place of calculated order. He stopped before the table, his cap pulled low, his face set in a permanent scowl. "My lords," he began, his voice a low, gravelly rumble, like magma shifting beneath the earth. "My fleets await your final command. But I must again voice my objection to this limited engagement." Saturn raised an eyebrow. "Limited? We have authorized the largest naval mobilization in modern history, Fleet Admiral. You have mobilized fleets to engage his forces." "Yes," Akainu countered, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "But you restrict me. You speak of a single, surgical strike with this mother flame weapon while I hold them in place. It's too clean. Too precise. It is not enough." He stepped closer to the table, his shadow falling over the 5 men. The temperature in the room seemed to rise a few degrees. "This is not a cancer that can be removed with a scalpel," Akainu snarled, the magma of his conviction beginning to bubble to the surface. "It is a plague that has infected the hearts of the people. Wano, Alabasta, Dressrosa, Provence, dozens of kingdoms are now looking to this pirate as a savior. The very idea of absolute justice is being eroded. We must make an example not just of him, but of the very concept of rebellion." His voice dropped to a fanatical, zealous hiss. "Give me full authority. Let me unleash a global Buster Call campaign. Let me burn every island that has ever given him shelter, every port that has welcomed his ship. Let us erase his memory from the world with fire and ash, so that for the next 800 years, no one will ever again dare to utter the word freedom in defiance of our order." For a long moment, the 5 elders were silent, observing the man before them. He was their perfect weapon, a man whose belief in justice was so absolute, so devoid of nuance or mercy, that he had become a living embodiment of their will to control. He was a force of nature they had pointed at their enemies, a volcano they had chained. But volcanoes were notoriously difficult to manage. "Your zeal is noted, Sakazuki," Jupiter said, his voice smooth and placating. "And your commitment to absolute justice is, as always, commendable. But you are a hammer, and you see every problem as a nail," Warkiri added bluntly. "A global campaign of annihilation would destabilize the entire world. Trade would cease. The tributes from the 4 blues would stop. It would create more chaos than it would quell. It is an inefficient, brutish solution." Akainu's jaw tightened, a vein throbbing in his temple. "Efficiency? We are speaking of the survival of our world order. Of the sanctity of the celestial dragons. What is temporary chaos compared to eternal security?" "You misunderstand the nature of the true threat, Fleet Admiral," Saturn said, his voice taking on a professorial, condescending tone. "Izokumidori's strength is not the issue. We have faced strong men before. His alliances are not the issue. We have crushed greater empires. The threat is his ideology. It is a narrative. And you cannot burn a narrative. But you can burn the ones who listen to it," Akainu retorted. "A counterproductive measure," Mars interjected softly. "Martyrs are the seeds from which new rebellions grow. We have learned this lesson over many centuries. No, this Deku and his Alliance of the Dawn require a more nuanced approach. We will not create a martyr. We will create a cautionary tale. We will demonstrate that his brand of hope does not lead to salvation, but to utter, instantaneous oblivion." Saturn steepled his fingers. "The plan is set. The fleets will engage. The weapon, under our direct control, will fire. We will decapitate his movement by destroying its symbolic hearts. Wano, Fishman Island, Alabasta. We will show the world that his protection is meaningless. That his promise is a lie. His hope will curdle into despair. His followers will scatter. The narrative will die." Akainu stared at them, his face a mask of contemptuous disbelief. He saw their logic, but he abhorred its lack of passion, its coldness. He saw it as weakness, a failure to commit to the purifying fire he so craved. "As you command," he bit out, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. He gave a stiff, formal bow, turned on his heel, and strode from the room, his fury radiating from him in palpable waves. Once he was gone, the elders relaxed slightly. "He is becoming difficult," Warkari noted with distaste. "A necessary evil," Nusjuro said, speaking for the first time, his voice sharp and clear as his blade. "His fire is useful, so long as it burns only our enemies." "The plan is sound," Saturn affirmed, turning his attention back to the matter at hand. "The weapon is ready. The coordinates are set. The moment our fleets make contact and pin Midoriya's forces in place, we will cleanse the board of his most powerful pieces." A heavy, profound silence settled over the room again. The decision had been made. The order was ready to be given. But it was not their order to give. They were the highest authority in the world government, the public face of absolute power. But even they served. As one, the 5 elders rose from their chairs. They walked in a silent procession out of their chamber, through a long, dark corridor guarded by the elite of Cipher Pole Aegis 0, their masked faces betraying no emotion. They came to a single, massive door of black, unadorned stone. It swung open before them, revealing a chamber beyond that was a paradox. It was called the Room of Flowers, but it was a garden of ghosts. The room was vast, filled with lush, vibrant flora from all over the world, but the air was still and dead. In the center of the garden, butterflies with wings of brilliant, impossible colors fluttered aimlessly, their beauty rendered meaningless and sterile in the tomb-like silence. And at the far end of this lifeless paradise, atop a small flight of stairs, stood the object of all power and hypocrisy in the world, the empty throne. It was a simple, unadorned seat of stone, built as a symbol that no single king would ever rule the world, a testament to the equality of the founding 20 nations. It was the world's most sacred lie. The 5 elders did not approach the throne. Instead, they stopped at the base of the stairs and knelt, their heads bowed, their ancient pride and immeasurable authority dissolving into simple, unquestioning servitude. They knelt before the figure that stood beside the throne, a being that should not exist, a secret that would shatter the world if ever revealed. The figure of Aimu was a slash of darkness against the pale light of the room. Their form was tall and slender, humanoid but unnervingly so, clad in flowing black robes that seemed to absorb the light. Their head was crowned with a bizarre, 4-pronged coronet that resembled a twisted version of the world government's own symbol. But it was their presence that was most terrifying. It was a haki of pure, absolute nothingness. If Deku's conqueror's haki was a broadcast of hope and life, Aimu's was a void, an anti-presence that drained the will, that promised only silence and endings. Aimu held a single, wanted poster in their long, unnaturally slender fingers. It was Deku's. With a slow, deliberate motion, Aimu drifted from the throne, descending the steps with a grace that was both fluid and disjointed, like a marionette controlled by an unseen hand. They glided across the floor, the butterflies scattering from their path as if fleeing from a predator. They stopped before the kneeling elders, holding the poster out. Saturn looked up, his face a mask of reverence. "The plan is in place, Aimu-sama," Saturn reported, his voice a respectful murmur. "The fleets are moving. The weapon is ready to purge the designated targets." Aimu remained silent for a long moment, their featureless face, a mere suggestion of a visage within the deep shadows of their hood, tilted down towards the poster. They raised their other hand and gently, almost curiously, traced the smiling, determined face of Izuku Midoriya. It was the touch of a scientist examining a microbe, of a god contemplating an amusing anomaly. Then, a voice echoed in the chamber. It was not a spoken voice, but a telepathic presence that wormed its way directly into the minds of the 5 elders. It was distorted, ancient, and layered, as if multiple voices were speaking at once, all of them filled with a chilling, dispassionate cruelty. "This one is different." The psychic voice was a physical pressure, making the elders bow their heads even lower. Roger laughed. Joy Boy danced. "But this one saves." A far more insidious concept. It gives them hope. Hope is the enemy of order. Hope is the flaw in the design. Aimu glided past them, drifting through the sterile garden, their robes whispering over the stone floor. They paused to look at a butterfly that had landed on a vibrant blue rose. They raised a finger, and the butterfly obediently crawled onto it. Your plan is sound. It is logical. It is the plan of men who think in terms of strategy and politics. Emu brought the butterfly closer to their face, regarding it with cold curiosity. But, it is a plan born of fear. You seek to make an example of his failures. You seek to discredit his ideology. Suddenly, Emu clenched their fist. The beautiful butterfly was instantly crushed into dust and colored powder, which drifted away on a non-existent breeze. This is insufficient. The psychic voice hardened, the pressure increasing tenfold, making the very air in the room feel heavy and thick. The 5 elders trembled, a reaction they had not displayed in centuries. Do not make an example of him. Emu turned, a silhouette of absolute authority against the backdrop of the empty throne. The void of their haki seemed to expand, to press in on the elders, threatening to extinguish their very consciousness. Make an example of his world. A new directive pulsed from Emu's mind, overriding the elders' carefully constructed plan. It was not a strategy. It was a decree of absolute, cosmic retribution. You target the symbols of his hope. Wano. Fishman Island. Alabasta. This is small. Petty. I do not wish to trim the branches of this weed. I wish to salt the earth so that nothing may ever grow there again. Emu's voice resonated with a rage that was terrifying in its coldness, the fury of a primordial being whose perfect, ordered creation was being disturbed by a persistent, irritating gnat. You will not simply destroy the capitals. You will not simply kill his allies. You will strike at the very heart of the dawn he promises. You will use the mother flame to boil the seas around Fishman Island until it is nothing but a barren, cooked rock. You will burn the forests of Wano until the land itself is ash. You will shatter the very bedrock of Alabasta until the desert reclaims all. A collective, silent gasp of horror went through the 5 elders. This was not strategy. This was not war. This was genocide on a planetary scale. This was madness. But they did not question it. They could not. But Emu was not finished. A final, terrible order came, a command so chilling it froze the very marrow in their ancient bones. And you will not hide it. You will broadcast it. You will use every den mushi in the world. You will show them the power of their god. You will show them the price of hope. You will show them the sky falling, the seas burning, the earth cracking. You will show them the faces of their heroes as they watch, helpless, as their worlds are unmade. Emu drifted back towards the throne, their point made, their decree absolute. Do not make an example of the pirate king. The voice echoed one last time, a final, terrible whisper that would haunt their dreams for what remained of their long lives. Erase the dawn he promises. The presence receded. The pressure lifted. Emu stood once more by the empty throne, as still and silent as the stone itself, the wanted poster of Deku still clutched in one hand. It was as if nothing had happened. Slowly, shakily, the 5 elders rose to their feet. Their faces, usually masks of cold authority, were pale and slick with a fine sheen of sweat. They looked at each other, seeing their own shock and horror reflected in their colleagues' eyes. The nuanced approach was gone, replaced by a command for biblical destruction. They had unleashed their rabid dog, a kainu, only to find that their true master was an even greater, more terrifying monster. Without a word they turned and walked from the room of flowers, their procession no longer proud, but like the walk of condemned men. They returned to their own chamber, the sterile cold now feeling like a welcome reprieve from the absolute zero of Emu's presence. Saturn was the first to speak, his voice a strained croak. The orders have been amended. This is madness, whispered Jupiter, wiping his brow with a trembling hand. The chaos, the fallout from this will be catastrophic. But it is an order, Nostro said, his voice flat, his hand now gripping his sword so tightly his knuckles were white. And we will obey. Workiri walked to a massive, globe-like map of the world that sat in the corner of the room. The calculations will have to be redone. The energy output required for such a level of destruction, it will strain the mother flame to its absolute limit. It may even damage it. Then it will be damaged, Saturn said, his voice regaining a sliver of its former authority. The will of Emu-sama is absolute. Our purpose is to enact it, not to question it. He walked to a special den mushi on a pedestal, one that connected directly to the control room for the weapon, a secret facility hidden even from Vegapunk himself. He picked up the receiver. "This is the Gorosei," he announced, his voice cold and devoid of all emotion, a perfect mask for the terror he felt. "The targeting parameters for Operation Dawnbreaker have been expanded. Listen carefully." As he relayed the new, horrific orders, a single thought echoed in the minds of all 5 men. They had always believed they were the shepherds of the world, maintaining order through careful, calculated control. They now understood the truth. They were not shepherds. They were merely the wardens of a slaughterhouse, and the true owner had just called for the culling to begin. And across the world, on a peaceful island where a young man with green hair had just accepted his own terrible destiny, 1,000 tiny dangerous senses, 1,000 premonitions of doom, began to stir in the hearts of the innocent. They did not know what was coming. They only knew that the sky felt heavy, and the world was holding its breath, waiting for the coming of a fire that would burn away the dawn. The sea was a sheet of rippling sapphire, unnaturally calm. Above, the sky was a vast, cloudless dome of brilliant blue. It was the kind of perfect day that sailors dream of, a day for easy sailing and hopeful horizons. But for the fleet gathered in the shadow of a colossal, unnamed rock formation near the Red Line, the tranquility was a mockery. It was the deep, silent breath before a world-shattering scream. This was the muster point, a location known only to a handful of trusted commanders, its coordinates erased from every chart. And here, the All-Blue Alliance had gathered in its full, breathtaking might. From the crow's nest of the saving grace, the view was a testament to the hope Deku had sown across the world. An armada stretched for miles in every direction, a patchwork quilt of rebellion and defiance. To the east, the sleek, dark vessels of the Revolutionary Army cut through the water, their black sails a stark promise of liberation. At their head was the Wind Grandma, Sabo's personal flagship, its figurehead a dragon breathing sculpted bronze flames. To the west, a motley but formidable collection of pirate crews bobbed on the gentle swell. These were the remnants of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, and other crews Deku had saved or inspired, captains who had sworn their loyalty not to a conqueror, but to a concept. There was the brutal beauty of the Yanta Maria Grand Fleet, led by the stoic Orlumbus, the longships of the giant pirates from Elbaf, their crews like living mountains on deck, and the quirky, almost comical ships of the Tantata pirates, vessels so small they looked like toys amidst the galleons, yet crewed by warriors of astonishing speed and strength. And among them, a familiar yellow submarine, the Polar Tang, sat low in the water, a silent, deadly promise of surgical chaos. And flanking them all, representing the future, were the proud ships from the kingdoms Deku had touched. The white and gold guard ships from Alabasta, their sails emblazoned with the royal crest. The sturdy, coral-adorned vessels from the Ryugu kingdom, manned by fishmen warriors whose power was doubled by the sea they sailed upon. And most prominently, the powerful, pagoda-topped warships of Wano, their hulls painted with fierce dragons and tigers, samurai warriors standing stoically on their decks, their loyalty as sharp and unbending as the steel of their blades. It was a fleet of pirates, revolutionaries, samurai, and royal guards. An impossible alliance. A navy of dreams, and at its heart, a single, unassuming ship built not for plunder but for protection, the Saving Grace. On its deck, the final preparations were underway, a whirlwind of controlled, purposeful activity. The air hummed with the low thrum of den mushi communications, the clank of armor being donned, and the sharp, focused voices of commanders issuing their final orders. Trafalgar Law, looking more like a battlefield surgeon than a pirate captain, stood over a massive map spread across the main deck table. He was a whirlwind of grim efficiency, his usual languid posture replaced by a sharp, kinetic energy. He moved markers representing fleet divisions with the tip of his cursed blade Kikoku, his mind processing 1,000 variables at once. The revolutionary fleet will form the vanguard, he dictated, his voice sharp and clear, cutting through the low din. Seiboya, your objective is to punch a hole. Create chaos. Draw their command's attention. We need you to be the fire they can't ignore. A crackle from a nearby den mushi answered, Seibo's voice coming through, confident and laced with fiery anticipation. Consider it done, surgeon of death. My dragons have been eager to spread their wings. The Wano contingent will hold the center, Law continued, tapping a group of markers representing Momonosuke's warships. You are our iron core. Your hockey-infused cannons can pierce their armor better than anyone's. Your task is to absorb their main assault and hold the line. No matter what. The samurai of Wano do not yield, came Momonosuke's voice, now steady and resolute, the voice of a true shogun. We are the unbreakable shield of this alliance. My forces and the other pirate crews will form the flanking wings, Law said, gesturing to the markers for the Polar Tang and the Grand Fleet. We will be the pincers. We'll harass their supply lines, target their vice-admirals, and prevent them from encircling our core. Our job is to be the thorn in their side they can't pull out. Elara stood beside him, cross-referencing his tactical placements with wind charts and tide predictions. The currents will be in our favor for the first 3 hours of engagement, she noted, her voice crisp and professional. But a weather front is moving in from the west. If the battle drags on, visibility will drop, and the sea state will become chaotic. Good, Law grunted. Chaos is my operating theater. Amidst this storm of strategy, Izuku Midoriya moved like its quiet eye. He wasn't directing fleet movements or barking orders. He knew his strengths, and grand naval strategy was Law's and Elara's domain. His role was different. His role was to be the heart of the machine, the source of the will that powered this impossible army. He walked among his allies, a simple word of encouragement here, a shared look of understanding there. He stopped by a group of fishermen warriors, their scales shimmering in the sun. They were nervously checking their weapons, their anxiety a palpable thing. Remember what you're fighting for, Deku said softly, his voice cutting through their tension. He gestured to the open sea. A world where your children can dream of the sun without fear. A world where your home is not a symbol of segregation, but a bridge between two peoples. The lead fishman, a grizzled warrior with a scar across his eye, looked at Deku and slammed a fist over his heart. For Princess Shirahoshi. For the sun. We will not fail you, Pirate King. Deku gave them a firm, reassuring nod and moved on. He found a group of samurai from Wano, meticulously cleaning their katanas. They sat in perfect seiza, their focus absolute. He didn't interrupt their ritual with words. He simply stood before them and gave a deep, respectful bow. The lead samurai, a veteran whose face was a road map of 100 battles, looked up, met Deku's eyes, and returned the bow with a silent, profound understanding. No words were needed. Their honor and their lives were pledged to the cause. He continued his walk, his danger sense a low, constant hum at the base of his skull. It wasn't warning him of an immediate threat, but of the sheer, overwhelming storm of malice that was gathering just over the horizon. It was a feeling like standing on a beach and sensing the distant, terrifying water retreat that precedes a tsunami. His path led him to the stern of the ship, where a solitary figure was staring out at their wake. It was Koa. The giant fishman helmsman was polishing the ship's wheel, a massive wooden circle worn smooth by his powerful hands. He buffed the wood with a focus that was almost meditative, his movements slow and deliberate. Deku stood beside him, watching the perfectly calm sea stretch out behind them. For a moment, they just stood in silence, the only sounds the gentle lapping of water against the hull and the soft buffing of the cloth on the wood. Are you afraid, Koa? Deku asked quietly. Koa paused in his work. He looked at his own reflection in the polished brass of the wheel's hub. When I was a slave, he rumbled, his voice deep and thoughtful, I was afraid every day. I was afraid of the guards. I was afraid of the buyers. I was afraid I would forget the feel of the sea. I was afraid I would die in a tank of stale water. He turned his gaze from the wheel to the endless blue expanse of the ocean. I am not afraid anymore. To be afraid is to be a slave to your fear. You have given me a sea to sail freely. He looked down at his own massive, webbed hands. You have given me a wheel to steer. You have given me a purpose. He turned and met Deku's eyes, his own dark orbs holding a deep, profound loyalty that was more potent than any oath. I will guard this ship. I will guard our crew. I will steer us through the heart of the storm and into the dawn you promised. That is not a thing to fear. It is a thing to be proud of. He finished with a simple, powerful declaration. I will guard it with my life. Deku felt a familiar warmth spread through his chest. It was the strength of his friends, a power more real and tangible than even the hockey that flowed through his veins. He placed a hand on Koa's broad shoulder. Thank you, Koa. I wouldn't want anyone else at the helm. As he turned to leave, a thought struck him. A memory from the vestige world. He paused. Koa, he said, do you know the story of Joy Boy? Koa's brow furrowed slightly. An old tale. A legend. A man who made a promise to my ancestors. A promise to raise our island to the surface, to let us live under the real sun. He looked at Deku, a hint of curiosity in his eyes. Why do you ask? No reason, Deku said, a small, sad smile on his face. Just an old story. But he knew it wasn't. He was beginning to understand that he was not just fighting for a new future, but to settle an ancient debt. A promise made to Koa's people, a promise that had been broken for 800 years. Leaving Koa to his vigil, Deku went in search of Alara. He found her in her cabin, which was less a living space and more an archive. Maps covered every surface, books were stacked in precarious towers, and poneglyph rubbings were pinned to the walls like macabre wallpaper. The air smelled of old paper, ink, and focused intensity. Alara herself was hunched over a small, intricate device on her desk, a pair of jeweler's goggles pushed up on her forehead. Final adjustments? Deku asked, leaning against the doorframe. Just calibrating the frequency, she replied without looking up, her fingers deftly manipulating tiny wires and dials with a pair of tweezers. This has to be perfect. The device was a modified eternal pose, but instead of pointing to a single island, it was linked to a unique den mushy signal. It was their ace in the hole, a piece of spycraft worthy of the Revolutionary Army's best. According to Sabo's mole, she explained, her voice tight with concentration, the main Marine Command ship, where the 5 elders will likely be overseeing this operation from afar, broadcasts a constant, encrypted signal to the Mother Flame Control Center. It's a dead man's switch of sorts. If the signal is ever interrupted, the weapon cannot fire. This pose is designed to lock onto the unique electromagnetic signature of that specific broadcast. She finally looked up, her dark eyes burning with a fierce, intelligent light. She held up the modified compass. The needle wasn't pointing north or towards any island. It was spinning erratically, waiting for its target signal to come within range. The moment their command ship enters a 500-mile radius, this needle will lock on. It will give us the exact, real-time location of the head of the snake, she said. She pushed the device across the desk to him. Don't lose it. Deku took the eternal pose, its metal cool against his skin. It felt incredibly heavy, a small object that held the key to their entire strategy. You're amazing, Alara, he said, his voice filled with genuine awe. A faint blush touched her cheeks, a rare crack in her professional armor. Just doing my job, Captain, she said, quickly turning back to her charts. Someone has to do the thinking while you're busy punching things. But as he turned to leave, she spoke again, her voice softer. Izuku. He paused, looking back at her. When I was a girl, she began, her gaze distant, fixed on a map of her former kingdom, a place now marked only by a black cross. My father was a royal scholar. He believed in the world government. He believed in their promise of justice and order. He taught me to revere them. She traced the outline of her lost home. When the buster call came, he stood on the shore, holding the flag of our kingdom, believing they would see reason. He died believing in a lie. For years, all I had was rage, a desire to see the world that killed him burn. She finally looked at Deku, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. You gave me something else. Something better than revenge. You gave me a reason to build, not just to break. You gave me a cause worth more than my own anger. She took a deep, shaky breath. When you get to that command ship, when you face them, do it for my father. Do it for everyone who died believing in a lie. Deku's throat was tight. He could only nod, the weight of her trust, her pain, settling in his heart alongside all the others. He clutched the eternal pose tightly. It wasn't just a tactical device anymore, it was a promise. He stepped back out onto the main deck. The sun was beginning its slow descent towards the horizon, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and red. The calm was holding, but it felt more fragile now, thinner. He could feel the anticipation rippling through the fleet, a collective tightening of nerves. He walked past the galley, the smell of cooking food wafting out. It was Sanji, on loan from the Straw Hat crew, orchestrating a massive feast. He believed that no one should go into battle on an empty stomach. Nearby, Usopp was distributing his special inventions, the pop greens, to the allied crews, demonstrating how to use the explosive plants and impact dials. Chopper and Dr. Bell were overseeing the setup of a massive floating infirmary, a ship dedicated solely to treating the wounded. Every single person had a role. Every single person was contributing. This was what a real alliance looked like. Deku found a quiet spot near the prow, away from the hustle and bustle. He pulled out his own notebook, the one he had carried with him from his world, its pages filled with the familiar, frantic scrawl of his analysis. But he didn't write about his enemies. He didn't break down their powers or strategies. Instead, he began to sketch. He drew his crew, Koa at the helm, his expression stoic and unshakable. Elara surrounded by maps, a fierce light in her eyes. Dr. Bell, fussing over a patient. He drew his allies, Sabo, wreathed in flame, a defiant grin on his face. Law, cool and calculating, his hand on his sword. Momonosuke, standing tall as a shogun. Vivi and Shirahoshi, their faces filled with resolve. He drew the people he was fighting for, the smiling children of Wano, the hopeful faces of the fishmen, the resilient people of Alabasta. He drew the faces of the vestiges in his mind, Nana Shimura's heroic smile, an All Might's skeletal, proud visage. He was reminding himself of the stakes. He was cataloging his reasons. This wasn't a fight for glory, or territory, or a title. It was a fight for all of them. Each face he drew was a brick in the foundation of his resolve. He muttered as he drew, a habit he would never lose, his quiet voice a litany of purpose. Plan Gamma, isolate Kizaru. His speed is the biggest random variable. Need to use Fa Jin's stored energy for explosive bursts of movement. Danger sense is key to predicting his light path vectors. Plan Delta, Akainu's magma. Absolute justice versus absolute heroism. Cannot be beaten with simple force. Must be a battle of wills. The United States of World Smash is the final option, but the strain must only use it if there's no other choice. Must protect the crew first. Plan Epsilon, the five elders themselves. The final confrontation. Must not just defeat them, but expose them. The world needs to see the truth. The Den Mushi Alara's team prepared, must get it into the throne room. Sabo's diversion will be critical. He was creating contingencies for his contingencies, his mind a labyrinth of possibilities, preparing for a battle that would be fought not just with fists, but with strategy, with conviction, and with hope. Suddenly, a voice shattered the evening calm. It wasn't a human voice. It was a cry from the highest mast, a shriek of pure, unadulterated alarm. Sails. On the horizon, every head in the fleet snapped up. Every conversation stopped. The clatter of plates in the galley ceased. The only sound was the gentle lapping of the waves. Deku shot to his feet, his notebook forgotten on the deck. He leaped to the railing, his eyes straining towards the east, where the sun was bleeding into the sea. At first, it was just a line of white specks, tiny and insignificant against the vastness of the ocean. But they grew with an unnatural speed. White specks became white shapes, and white shapes resolved into the unmistakable silhouette of marine battleships. Dozens of them. Then 100. Then more. An endless, implacable sea of white and gold, their cannons gleaming in the dying light, their sails emblazoned with the seagull of the world government. They stretched from one end of the horizon to the other, an oceanic wall of steel and firepower. It was a fleet so massive it seemed to blot out the curve of the earth. It was the fist of the world government, raised and ready to strike. And leading them, a flagship twice the size of the others, its figurehead a snarling, magma-wreathed hound. Akainu's personal vessel. Behind them, the sky was changing. The brilliant oranges and reds were being consumed by a strange, unnatural darkness. Storm clouds, black and angry, were gathering with impossible speed, swirling directly above the approaching fleet. Lightning, not of nature but of some terrible, unseen energy, flashed within the clouds. It was not a storm front. It was a cage. The weapon was being charged. Uranus was awakening. The calm was over. The trap was sprung. The war had begun. A tense, heart-stopping silence fell over the All-Blue Alliance. For a full 10 seconds the two fleets stared at each other across a gulf of calm, blue water, two ideologies made manifest, two futures for the world on a collision course. Then, Deku's voice rang out, clear and powerful, amplified by a den mushy so that every ship in his fleet could hear him. It was not the voice of a fearful boy or a reluctant king, it was the voice of a revolution. All Blue Alliance! He roared, his voice filled with the unshakable conviction he had found in the heart of his power. Look at them. They have come to tell you that your dreams are forbidden, that your hope is a crime. They have come to put you back in your cages. He pointed a defiant, scarred hand at the approaching armada. We are here to give them our answer. He took a deep breath, and the green lightning of One for All flared to life around him, a beacon of emerald defiance against the setting sun. Raise the sails. Man the cannons! For freedom! For the dawn! For everyone! A single, unified roar erupted from his fleet, a sound of 1,000 different voices, pirates, revolutionaries, samurai, guards, all joined in a single, thunderous cry of defiance. It was the sound of a world waking up. On the deck of the Saving Grace, Law smirked, drawing his sword. Room. A massive, translucent blue sphere began to expand from his position, enveloping their section of the fleet. Aboard the Wind Grandma, Sabo grinned, flames erupting from his fists. Let's give them a welcome they won't forget. The great battle for the fate of the world was about to begin.